Greystone Technology CEO Peter Melby joins this week for some thought-provoking conversation as we break down news from Intel, ESET, BlackPoint Cyber, and Gradient, plus a special guest interview with Karl Palachuk and Amy Babinchak from the National Society of IT Service Providers. It's ChannelPro Weekly number 241, A Herd of Elephants. Hello and welcome to ChannelPro Weekly, episode number 241. My name is Matt Whitlock, Technology Editor, Online Director, and your host of this wonderful program designed exclusively for IT providers like yourselves, managed services providers, IT consultants, managed security services providers. There's more names. You all go by a lot of names, but you all do very, very similar things, which is helping businesses with their technology needs and protection, because everybody needs protection now. We're going to talk a lot about protection and security and all kinds of things like that today. And if that sounds like of interest to you, it should be, because you're in the right place. And we've got a lot. I'll break down the show a little bit here in a minute, but first I want to introduce someone who, if you've been a subscriber for a long time, if you listen for a long time, you know this voice. You hear it almost every week. He is the man of the hour, the one who makes ChannelPro what it is. Essence du ChannelPro is who he is. Executive Editor Rich Freeman. Welcome, Rich.
Well, thank you very much, Matt. And let's just be clear: the kind of protection we're talking about here isn't the kind that some mafioso would collect from you. This is like the cybersecurity protection we'll be talking about.
Yeah, but interestingly enough, though, that's actually driven a lot by the mafia these days. So it's really hard to separate those two, anymore. Do you need physical securities like guns and ammo, or do you need software to sneak out threats? These days, you might need both. It depends on who's hitting you.
It is all coming together, isn't it?
It is, and what fun that is. So, Rich, we've got a big show ahead. First, I want to say, how's your week? How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm at home this week. I'm going to be out on the road a lot starting next week. But home last week, home this week, and enjoying it.
Very cool. We should turn that into like some kind of contest. Like if you can guess which hotel Rich is at based on the room background, you can like win a prize or something. We'll have to work on that, because there's a lot of fun. But because when you go on the road, like, yeah, you're out for long stretches, so it'll be fun to see where you land as we move along, and because you're going to all these various shows. But speaking of shows, I wanted to point out we got one coming up next week, I believe. It's not next week, 2 weeks from now, but it's a big one. It's one of our virtual events. And we should invite our listening and viewing audience to come and check it out. Tell them why they would want to do that.
Yeah, well, we're specifically talking about our Business Management Online Summit event, which takes place Tuesday, October 11th. And we've just got tons of awesome content for you about running a successful IT business. We're going to have a session that I moderated, actually, about building a value proposition that sets you apart from the herd. There are a lot of other MSPs and channel pros out there. What are you going to say? How are you going to market yourself? What are you going to do that's going to actually help you stand out from the crowd? We're going to talk about how to kind of right size your tool stack, because it's pretty easy to get that stack bloated. But do you have the tools that you need? But only the tools that you need. We have some folks talking about that. We have a session that a gentleman we're about to meet in a little while is going to participate in which some MSPs are going to talk with Chris Blackman of the Janet Shine's organization about how any techie out there, any tech provider can learn how to sell. We'll talk about EOS. We're going to talk about video and using video in marketing, which is this hugely underexploited resource. We're going to talk about how to keep your customers happy despite inflation and supply chain issues and so on and so forth. So all sorts of great stuff. Read all about it. Register. Unlimited room for all of you to attend. Go to events.channelpronetwork.com and look it up. And we all hope to see you Tuesday, October 11th.
Yeah, absolutely, something you won't want to miss. And great. The one nice thing about the virtual events is that there is lots of space for everyone. So make sure you join. Get that chat going. Put a shout out that you're a listener and viewer on the show, and you might win a prize. Who knows? There are all kinds of stuff that goes on, but you're definitely going to get a lot out of it. And it's and it's great because you don't even have to dress up. You can attend in your pajamas if you really, really want. It doesn't matter. But you're going to learn a lot, and that's what's important. Events.channelpro.com. Make sure you check it out. Now, Rich, you alluded to someone who might be on the show here with us. Where is this person? Oh, there he is. And it's very excited to have him back. The last show he was on was episode 173, and it was a great episode. We had a ball. He is the CEO of Greystone Technology. It's a Denver-based 6-time Inc. 5000 honoree and 6-time top workplace winner. He's been named one of Colorado's top 25 CEOs, 40 under 40, and a ChannelPro 2020 visionary. His leadership at Greystone has led to 20. That's right, 20. That's a lot. 20, a lot, consecutive years of growth and consistent recognition for market innovation. Please welcome the one, the only, the fabulous Peter Melby. Welcome, Peter.
Thanks for having me. I always love this stuff.
It is awesome having you on.
Yeah. I was wondering when I was going to get the invite back. It's been a little boring without, actually it wasn't that long ago. So
it wasn't too long ago, we definitely wanted to get you back. I know that, but sometimes scheduling and
I was on the road with you guys last year, which was a blast. So, it's, that was a ton of fun too. Actually hanging out in person, it's like one notch better than hanging out on Zoom.
Well, I would say several notches better than hanging out on Zoom personally, but yeah, no, I love to have you on the show anytime you can make it, and anytime we have an opening, because you can never get enough Peter Melby, in my opinion. Always awesome to have you on. So for those who may have missed you at one of our shows or missed one of the last episode you were on, tell us more about Peter.
Yeah. So founded an MSP when I was 20 with my business partner. Spent the last 21 years fixing the mistakes that I made in my business by starting it when I was 20. It's interesting. I simultaneously fell in love with this industry and really struggled with this industry in the late 90s, early 2000s. It was really my first foray into a career, profession. I actually dropped out of college to start my MSP. And it wasn't that kind of thing where I really knew what I wanted to do. It was just that, college was boring for someone who wanted to work on computers back then. They didn't, all the computers were old. There was very little, that had to do with modern business computing, in the collegiate realm at that point. And so, just did what I wanted to do, which was work on computers every day. And a few years into it, kind of picked up my head and said, well, I got to figure out what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. I took a break from school that ended up being permanent. And then realizing that in doing that, it had to be far more sophisticated than me just waking up every day and saying, well, what computers am I going to fix and for who? And thankfully, at that time, the MSP industry started to really, it was the beginning of even starting to use that term. And so I loved the idea of these companies coming together to form an actual industry. At the same time, I felt like so much of it was backwards. So much of it was focused on, how we think as far as technicians, not how businesses and clients think. And so that was really the genesis of what Greystone became was, what we call, sometimes backwards, sometimes upside down, but an MSP that's designed with business needs in mind. It's designed from the client backwards, not from what we know forwards. And so we grew. We're about 20, just shy of 25 million in revenue. About 120 staff. And a couple of years ago, we joined New Charter Technologies. That's which we talked about a lot last time, which is a pretty unique, investment partnership and equity partnership. So rather than just selling our company and moving on our merry way, or holding on to it, and struggling, with the consistent challenges of, how do we scale and resources, and all of that, we found a really great, unique option, in the new charter family. So that's a lot of where my focus goes, as well as we continue to build that. We have 22 companies now in the new charter family, in the new charter portfolio. So never a dull moment. But really what it came down to is I love this industry and I love disrupting this industry. And so as a result, I have a lot of fun with people like you. I have a lot of fun with other MSPs, in the market, in the channel, to really, innovate what we can do to continue to push, things ahead. 100 people, 120 people in an organization is still a small business, by most definitions and technical definitions, but in the MSP space, it's pretty significant. And so there's reasons for that. We've spent a lot of time just working to explore those reasons, and find ways to help other organizations scale. So between my role at Greystone, continuing to drive that growth and innovation, and my role at New Charter, doing the same, for 21 other companies, and then always just connecting with organizations to figure out who we can bring in next. So, like I said, never a dull moment.
Yeah, and one of the things that I really love about you is that you do a lot to also kind of share the things that you've been successful with other MSPs and kind of help drive their success as well, and teach new things. Talk about some of the things that you've done outside of growing your own company to help others. Yeah.
So there's this idea. I had lunch yesterday, 2-hour lunch, with a direct competitor here in Denver. And some people shy away from things like that. Actually, it's so funny story. I might have told it last time, but people forget. The very first ChannelPro show I ever did, you guys had me out. I don't know if you remember this, Rich.
I do. Yes.
Yeah. So I show up. I'm going to be on a panel, meet everybody in person. I think I had done a few things, just phone calls, and articles and things like that. And they said, "All right, yeah, we're going to get together and talk about your panel." And I look over. And Vince Tenorello from Anchor Network Solutions is there. And I had never met Vince in person, but I knew who he was. We'd been in the Denver market together for a long time. And we both looked at each other and said, we're direct competitors. And I remember Rich and he was like, "Oh no." And it took us, it was probably a good 30 seconds. And we're like, no, this is fine. We both kind of had to feel it out to make sure it was fine for the other person. But we had so much fun on the panel and actually just sat, at the bar, both nights of that event, just sharing stories. Vince and I still get together, and, share ideas, share stories. If there's a client that's better off with them, or better off with us, we'll have open conversations about that. It's one of my favorite stories about how positive this, treating this as an open ecosystem can be. And so I was having lunch with another one of our competitors yesterday, and we were just talking about the fact that we don't run across each other that much. There are some really strong, MSPs in the Denver market, and we don't fight for business from each other, nearly as much as we fight for business from just bad IT. I mean, that's if people ask, well, what's your competition? Bad IT, whether it's in-house, whether it's, outsourced, from someone who's not, doing their job correctly, whether it's not mature enough, all of those things like that is just such a green field of opportunity in any market, that we don't have to be territorial, about our secrets, and years ago, when Elon Musk opened up all the Tesla patents to any manufacturer, who wanted to go and use them, I remember a lot of people are like, "Oh, that's so benevolent, of him," or "That's so altruistic." I was like, no, it's not. He knows he's great. He knows what he's got, and he's willing to use it to elevate an entire industry that will also carry him forward. And that's generally, my take on this is that I've got to continue to outperform a market. I've got to continue to lead, a market in innovation. And in doing so, being really transparent in what I'm doing. Ideas are not what move us forward. It's the execution, on those ideas. And so I will say that openness has been just, number one, it makes it a whole lot more fun. And when I was talking to our competitor yesterday when we sat down for lunch, he's like, we were talking about this exact topic, and he said, "Yeah, no." He's like, "Most of us are just like, oh, thank God I have someone to talk to," and who really understands what it's like to be doing this. And so, a few things that we've done over time. other than just building relationships in the markets that we're in with our competition so that we can elevate, the entire field. That's my favorite part, is the personal relationships that I have. But everything from helping us to, I have a talk that I give, at conferences, some IT conferences, and actually a lot of non-IT conferences. It's called Boss or Babysitter. And it outlines our history in building a culture at scale, and where where our pitfalls were, the challenges, and ultimately some of the really tactical systems and processes that we built to help, take a culture that is a very, very tight-knit, family-oriented group of 8 or 10 or 12, into the realm where you have multiple levels of management, and things like that. So might be what I'm best known for, in certain circles. Created, the MSP stimulus pledge as the stimulus dollars started flowing, and recognizing that the MSP industry was uniquely benefited by that, because we were so labor heavy, and we did have a short term, impact, in that, but basically a pledge for how we were going to use those dollars, rather than just putting them in pockets and things like that. And then, as part of New Charter, what we've done is we've developed a set of methodologies that we consider best practices for best in class companies. And our whole goal at New Charter is to buy, to invest in, and partner with organizations that are best in class companies. And every company that we form an equity partnership with also reinvests in the portfolio. And so it's this wonderful world of, shared ownership, shared vision, but everyone still runs the key operations of their own organization. And in doing that, we can help elevate them, so we can take a $5 million company. We can't make them a $5 million company overnight, but we can show them the path that we took and help their path to be a little bit faster and a little bit straighter. And so the front runner methodologies are really, things that we have built around our own companies in the portfolio, but we're actually publishing a lot of that and bringing a lot of that into industry events, things like that, and the 4 pillars that we think are critical in running an MSP, being people, growth, business efficiency, and client experience. And so obviously there's financial elements in there, but it's far beyond just, a lot of the benchmarking and best practices around, well, here's how you should charge for this, and things like this. But here's actually what's going to elevate, organizations to mean more in the market, which is going to benefit everybody. So
all the companies in this New Charter thing, they're all IT providers like you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're all MSPs. Basically, 5 million up to 30 million. So definitely mature organizations, but also organizations that understand what it's, what this, industry has the potential to be. And so it's nice because, like I said, we run our own organizations. I'm a little bit unique because I play a split role between, New Charter, and Greystone, my MSP, and my longtime, business partner, really has the day-to-day reins, at Greystone and leads that. But it's really nice because we can lean on each other. I mean, we don't. I love MSPs that they'll buy 5 companies across the U.S. and say, yeah, we're a nationwide company. Like, no, you're not. You're just in 5 cities. And so that a little bit of where we're going to, is we're not going to blanket cover the entire, U.S., in the next 18 months. But we have, I think in 22 companies, we have probably 29, 30 markets that we can, lean on. So as we want a contract that has a significant presence in, Orange County, California. We've got, a new charter company there. It makes it seamless and also pushes us to be able to do, more, more of those types of, scale deals. And then we also combined, cybersecurity resources with the organizations that had really invested in that next level and built a true MSSP called Cyber 74 that serves anyone in the market. But the focus is on, obviously the 28 markets that we're in, the 21 other companies that we have, and their client bases, and being able to keep that separate but close to home, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So is there any sharing of like best practices or tool sets or anything that is any kind of standardization among the companies that make up this group?
Yeah, definitely. It's the thing where some things have to come together, because we do have shared investment and shared ownership. So finance and HR are systems that we've brought together across the entire group. We've hired, but we've also hired resources that individual MSPs would not be able to establish themselves. So we have, a true CFO. We have a VP of people who leads, our focus on our people, and the team of HR people who can help us to be more competitive in hiring markets, retention markets, development, developing our people. We have 4 full-time recruiters, working on behalf of our companies. We've brought together, some digital marketing services, and then those are central resources that we've created. Then the other piece of it is that we've brought together the key teams, sales teams, marketing resources, again, to share best practices, and to also talk about what life looks like, doing things a little bit more consistently. So it's not that we look at this and say we celebrate everyone, 22 companies doing things 22 ways. We recognize that we're in these markets that are unique. And a lot of the M&A activity makes sense on paper. It makes sense to investment organizations who like, oh, technology is a sexy investment. It's recurring revenue. It's great. It's a growing industry. Let's buy 5 companies, smash them together, and we'll get the uplift. And unfortunately, without recognizing the relationship aspect of these things and the local market presence that's, these boutique operations, that's not something that works out very well. I think, a lot of us love it when our competitors get acquired, because if the investment group or the investment thesis doesn't understand this industry, it's going to be a train wreck for the clients and the employees, which benefits the other companies in the market. And so that's been, the sharing of practices and joining each other, towards a similar trajectory and leaning on each other. We found to be far more advantageous, specifically to organic growth. It doesn't suffocate the growth the way that some of these investment opportunities, ends up doing. But sharing best practices is really the lifeblood. It's like a peer group on steroids.
Very, very interesting. And I imagine with 22 companies, you have enough people to pull from to do like a cross new charter technologies softball tournament rather than just a softball game.
It's true. I'll say the fantasy football league got a little large. We had to go to a survivor pool, things like that. We've got 850 employees, I think, across New Charter now. And we tell, it's kind of funny because I say this all the time. We're a pain in the ass. When it comes to the industry, because we're a unique model. But some days we want to be treated as 22 individual companies with individual, discretion. And some days, like when we talk to our big vendors, we want to be treated as, a $225 million company with 800 employees. And so it's kind of fun and also kind of annoying for everybody, around us, is that we're big enough that that obviously people have worked really, really hard to invest in addressing the uniqueness of our model, and specifically a lot of the big vendors. But I know that behind the scenes, they roll their eyes and be like, New Charter wants this now.
Well, it's an interesting background, and I'm sure that's been a lot of change, and you're learning a lot. Give us maybe 1 or 2 things that you've learned after joining this group that you wish you had known earlier.
It's interesting. One of the things that I've learned is that, personally, is that I'm a better leader not having, having an investment partner. That's something that I think a lot of MSP owners struggle with, the idea of giving up control. My partner and I were 50-50, so neither of us specifically had control, but it was us, and we trusted each other. We still do. But in breaking that connection and taking on, a significant investment partner, recognize that I actually make better decisions. And part of it is because we've been able to de-risk in the process. Part of it is because I know that, at the end of the day, an individual decision, is not as risky in the grand scheme of things as it was when we were on our own. And part of it is being able to watch the leaders around me, and see other people, how they make decisions, lean on each other. And it gives us the confidence, especially to make the tough calls. Because that's one of the things I've learned over the years is that most leadership comes down to, did you make the tough call early enough? And did you communicate it effectively? And did you work through it the right way? I think that's something that's been just so advantageous. I was like, control's overrated. In my mind, alignment, is extremely important. And that's been another thing that's been critical, is that we have an investment group that is largely hands off. The staff, at the portfolio level, is a very supportive, operation in which I play a part. But all of it centers around the idea that everyone recognizes that growth and money in this industry follow supporting people. Whether it's employees or clients, that's really where the focus needs to be. I think that's where a lot of private equity and investment theses miss. Is not recognizing that you can't just squeeze everything in this industry. If you squeeze people, it's going to drop more to the bottom line. Actually, it's just going to drop people out of your business. Just clients and employees, which isn't going to help the financial aspect of it. So it's been, finding that alignment with an investment partner, has been absolutely key. The last thing I'll say is that I've learned is what operational excellence, really takes in an organization, even a federated organization, of 850 people. If you have 5 people on your team, you can talk to all 5 of them at once, and you can generally get a cohesive communication, out. But just the leadership hygiene that is required to build a trusting culture with 850 people, it's one of my favorite things, to endeavor. And you realize that 850 individually thinking people, who with the space to care, and the care about what they're doing, the space to give feedback, and all of that, has to be a very, very well cultivated organization. And it's very different than running $1 million MSP. It's very different than running, a $25 million MSP. And that part's a blast at the same time that there are just like lessons by the day.
Very cool. Well, thanks for sharing a little bit about that kind of journey. Really, really interesting kind of where you've ended up and how you're part of this group. And I'm sure a lot of MSPs, haven't thought about that or, talk to anybody that's kind of in that role and might give them something to think about as a potential direction for their business.
Yeah. I was on the record for a lot, probably on, just I've done with you all, about the dangers of acquisition and M&A and consolidation in our market. And I still generally believe in those dangers. I just, I've learned that it's not all bad. It just has to it's got to come from that unified place, and that unified focus on the people, not just the bottom line.
For sure. Well, interesting stuff. And we got a lot more ahead to talk about too, but thank you so much for coming on and for joining us here and sharing that with us. But we've got a lot of show ahead still, and we need to dive into that.
I'll talk less.
no, talk more. It's great. Honestly, it really is really good. But we do need to get to news, because I know Rich is kind of like sitting over there like, come on, it's my turn. I'm usually the one that drives this baby. But we got a lot of news ahead. Intel's in the news. We're going to be talking about some new stuff from them. ESET is in the news. We're going to talk about BlackPoint Cyber, and Gradient MSP is in the news as well. We're going to be talking about them, I should say Gradient. There's Gradient, there's Gradient MSP, kind of different the same but different thing. So Gradient. I'm sorry, Rich. I shouldn't have inserted 3 letters into your headline that didn't exist. My apologies. Folks, also, we are going to be joined later on in the show by Karl Palachuk and Amy Babinchak from the National Society of IT Service Providers. We kind of talked to them about a year ago, and they're going to come back. We recorded that earlier due to time scheduling issues, but it's a little bit of a longer discussion, but I will tell you, it is really, really insightful. Peter has a lot to say in that as well, and it's really good. You'll absolutely want to stay tuned in for that. But Rich, without further ado, why don't we get to the news and talk about Intel? They got some new stuff. What do they got?
Yeah. They held a conference this week, their innovation conference. I think it's the first time they've met with anyone in person since before the pandemic. And they took advantage of the venue and the stage to make some announcements. And first and foremost, not a surprise, hardware related, but then we're going to come back to something software related they announced that I'm actually kind of excited about. For reasons that we will see. But the big news at the show was the launch of the 13th gen Intel Core processor family, their new PC, desktop, laptop processor family, codenamed Raptor Lake, if you keep track of these kind of things. Eventually, there will be 22 different SKUs in the 13th gen line. Intel saying you're going to get up to 15% better single-threaded performance, up to 41% better multi-thread performance. The first of those 22 chips to reach market will arrive next month, October 20th to be precise. There will be 6 unlocked desktop processors in what they're calling their K series. These are aimed at principally gamers and content creators. So if you're doing video editing or CAD kind of work, et cetera, people with some need for a little extra horsepower. So the top of the line of those 6 that they sort of showcased at the conference is going to be the Core i9 13900K, the i9 SKU in this K series here.
Just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it, Rich? Doesn't it just roll right off? i9 13900K ASTBLTQ.
It's pure poetry. Yeah, absolutely.
It writes
and unforgettable. I'm sure everyone listening or watching right now already knows exactly what to ask for when they're placing their first order. So as we know, in the 12th gen, Intel started introducing these specialized cores, the performance cores and the efficient cores that were supposed to kind of help these multi-core processors both boost speed and battery life. So on the i9 13900K, you've got 8 performance cores, 16 efficient cores, 32 threads, 36 megs of level 3 cache. So this is going to be the hottest processor, basically, of the 22 that they eventually come out with. Up to 24% better gaming performance as a result, up to 34% faster content creation workflow as a result. There are going to be 2 i7s and 2 i5s in the K series with smaller specs there, but all still pretty powerful compared to the rest of the 22 that are going to come out. And I'm curious to hear what Matt thinks about the price points on these. But for those, the i9s, there are 2 of them. Those are going to start, the recommended starting price is $564. When you go down to the i7s, $384. When you go down to the i5s, $294 is what they're looking at there. They also, speaking of prices, they also introduced a new gaming GPU at the show, the ARC A770. That one's going to ship October 12th. And the big selling point that they emphasized at Intel was that this is going to list at $329. And so they were kind of without naming names exactly, they were kind of comparing it to comparable NVIDIA products that are more in the $399 vicinity. And they basically said that, pricing on these kind of gaming GPUs has been climbing up in recent years. And so there's a deliberate strategy at Intel to introduce similarly spec'd products that are going to be a little bit more affordable. And then last but not least, at least for me, is that software product I alluded to. It's going to ship a little bit later in the year, but they're calling it Unison. And basically, if you out there today, you have a Mac and an iPhone and an iPad, you know how well Apple's continuity technology enables all these things to work together, and you can actually manipulate your phone from your laptop, for example. Microsoft has an app. It used to be called Your Phone. I think they're calling it Phone Link now, and it's part of Windows 11. And if you have an Android phone, you can kind of work with that phone inside of Windows in a similar sort of way. If you're like me and you have a Windows PC and an iPhone, you're just out of luck. But this is what Unison is designed to fix. So it's basically going to enable people with Intel-based PCs, x86 PCs, to seamlessly connect with, interact with ARM-based mobile devices on iOS and Android. So the first generation of this product, and they're sort of hinting there's more to come, the first generation will let you, like me, on this laptop I'm using right now, I'll be able to send and receive calls, send and receive texts, view notifications from my iPhone on the big screen here on my laptop, and with my main keyboard. I can do file transfers, they say, seamlessly between the phone and the PC, etc. The one trick about this, and the one thing that has me nervous, because I'm really looking forward to this, is I'm not 100% sure I'm going to get it. What they said is it will initially be available on select Intel Evo laptops from Acer, HP, and Lenovo on 12th gen processors, and then they're going to extend it out beginning early next year onto 13th gen designs that are going to be reaching market in bigger numbers there. So I'm on a Samsung right now, and I don't know if it's a 12th gen Samsung laptop. There's a little bit of a hole in there. I don't know if I get this or not, but I hope I do, because it would actually be a really cool thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of brands that are outside of those three in the notebook world. So we'll see. That's an interesting announcement for them. I'm kind of curious why Intel is bothering. That seems like an OS thing that should be addressed. But it's cool that it'll be cross-platform. It's kind of. I use the phone link app. It used to be terrible. Peter, I don't know if you use that. If you have an Android phone, it used to like not work at all. It was terrible. But actually, it's been working pretty well lately, and it's a very, very handy feature. So it's good that someone's taking charge. There's a lot in here to break down. We won't spend too long on the technical stuff. I will say a couple things, and then Peter, I want to get your thoughts. One, competition is good. If prior to AMD, the other big x86 processor name, prior to them building processors that are very desirable and very performance driven, SKUs like that i9 13900K, just beautiful. That probably would have been $1,000 processor, and we're seeing price points that are much more reasonable. So competition is a good thing. This looks great here. There's a lot of cores. I never thought I would ever see a day where an i5 SKU would have 14 cores, but that's a lot. But they have these big cores and little cores now, so it's like a 6, but there's 8 of those smaller ones. But I think that's this is the direction that CPU manufacturing has to go. We've got to make cores that are a little bit more workload driven, but we have to start distributing processing out to much more of these, and have these cores be a little bit more specialized, just so that way the internals of a big desktop computer that would be using this kind of stuff, these processors don't turn into nuclear factories of heat. They've got to be efficient, and they've got to be able to be powered efficiently. And so that's good to see. I don't have a lot to say about the i7, i5. I haven't read a lot of performance reviews of these yet. It seems like it's kind of an evolution of the 12th generation. So I'm not seeing anything here that's overly new. I will say seeing a separate Intel GPU is kind of weird. So and Peter, you're kind of nodding your head there a little bit. I know you're kind of off camera at the moment, but it is what took Intel so long, honestly, to get into this space? Because you'd think if anybody could give a go at it and make GPUs, separate cards, more processing, you'd think Intel would do it. But man, they really just haven't. over the years. So this is kind of an interesting thing, and something and a third player in the GPU space, if they can produce good quality GPUs that are supported, and that's the other kind of thing, they've got to be supported. But man, that'll help take a lot of the pressure off the GPU pricing market, because Peter, as you know, the GPU prices are just ridiculous over the last few years. So lots of good stuff here from Intel. Excited to see. So Peter, what are your thoughts on the new 12th gen and on their GPU?
So the 12th gen or 13th gen?
I'm sorry, 13th gen. I said 12th. I meant 13th.
I say that because it's probably the most technical I'm going to get in this response. No, I was like, I think I'm going to pat myself on the back. They talk a lot about shifting from working in your business to working on your business. And I realize as we're talking about 13th generation, Intel chips, that it's been a lot of generations since I've worked in my business, which I'm proud of. At the same time, I realized I was like, I think I'm that guy now that is just like, why is it slow? I just want it to work, And like when I was actually fixing the computers, I'd be like, well, there's a lot of reasons why. All of the numbers and all of the things that I always knew, and now I look at it, it's become such a commoditized thing, but. The thing that's really jumped out to me is the pressure in the processor space, that Apple's created, with the M1, M2, stuff where you look at it and say, that there's just the opportunity to and the pressure, when it comes to price and performance, that I think works, in this space. I think it is a generally positive thing, and so innovation happens, more rapidly when there is pressure. It can be a little bit more confined and a little bit more narrow. But I think when it comes to something where we're just looking for the most speed and power for the price, that's a good thing. So, I'm excited for that. I also feel like the life cycles of things are still getting tighter and tighter, where you look at it. And I used to tell my parents when they would call me and ask me to fix their computer, I'd be like, well, it's 7 years old, buy a new one. Like, but it's only 7 years old, and I was like, it's 3 years old, buy a new one. There's new processors out. You'll be fine.
What, you can't change the oil in it? You got to buy a new one?
No.
It's true. I feel like the service life of computers have gotten shorter and longer in some cases, because you can see a lot of really serviceable units, really depending on what you're doing. Right now in the business market, I think it might be a little bit more, certainly a little bit shorter. But I know in the consumer market, I mean, you can have a PC that's honestly 7 years old and probably perfectly suitable for basic everyday tasks. For those people who even do basic everyday tasks on computers anymore, which honestly, that's kind of a stretch too. There's not a lot in that market left. Everything is done on phones, and really a lot of stuff is done on phones. Even in the business space, a lot of stuff is done on phones.
Yeah.
So yeah, but anyway, so good stuff here from Intel. It's good to see them kind of rising up, trying to get competitive. I'm really excited to see what they do in the GPU space, because that market absolutely needs to get shaken up and needs more stuff to bring prices down into reasonable levels. And we'll look at the Unison thing. Rich, if they ever extend it to your laptop, we should talk about it, because I want to see how it works, because that's kind of interesting. But who owns an iPhone and a PC? Nobody does that, Rich. If you buy an iPhone, like, they force you into the Apple ecosystem. You got to buy everything Apple if you want it to work with anything. So you're kind of like this weird outlier.
I'm eyeing the new M2 MacBook Air. Because that's the last piece of my tech landscape Apple doesn't own. They've been chipping away at it. I've got an iPhone and an iPad, and I'm wearing a watch, but I'm still on a Windows PC, and I don't know. They're reeling me in.
See, Rich, I'm the opposite. I'm on a Mac right now, and I have an Android phone. Now I also have a Surface set up right here that you can't see for when I need to really use the Microsoft stack. So it's not all the way there, but yeah, they really do a good job of trying to pull you into all of it.
Yeah, they make life better for their customers and worse. It's like, if you buy everything Apple, you get a good experience. But if you buy anything outside of that ecosystem, they punish their customers. Like, you want to transfer a file from a phone to another phone, better be another iPhone. Otherwise, you're SOL.
I know. Is it efficiency or just corporate arrogance? I think there's some debate there.
Yeah, probably a little bit of Well, I would say more of the latter than the former, if you want my opinion. But I'm certainly more of a PC guy, and not really entrenched in the whole Apple. I like competition. I like variety. And Apple, they give you like one choice. It's like, well, it's this or nothing. And in the other world, you get all these things to pick from. And I like to pick, Peter. Picking is fun.
Yep.
To a degree. Anyway, let's move on. Lots more ahead. We've got another story. We're going to talk briefly about ESET. They've shipped the MSP version of a solution that some might have wanted. Rich, tell us about it.
Yeah. They actually announced a number of things. This was just this morning as we're recording this. And it fits into a larger theme that has, probably come up a bunch of times on this show earlier on in the year. Essentially, and this I'm quoting the head of sales for North America at ESET, that they're doubling down on their investment in MSPs. This is something we're seeing from a lot of security vendors in particular, but obviously vendors in general right now. The realization of how big a market and how fast growing a market the MSP world is. And so what ESET did specifically is they took a product that they introduced in March called Inspect Cloud. And so they used to have a product called Inspect, which was an EDR solution. In March, out comes Inspect Cloud, which is a cloud-based version of that, and it turns EDR into XDR. That was an enterprise corporate IT-oriented product. There is now an MSP-focused version of that product. What that means for today, principally, is that there are certain workflows, certain aspects of the product that have been adjusted to suit the MSP market. And so the particular example that was highlighted to me when I was interviewing those folks was alerts. If you're supporting a bunch of different clients with a solution like that, you're going to be getting more alerts than the typical IT department. And so there's more control over thresholds for when you get alerted, what you get alerted about, and what happens when alerts are received, et cetera. It is still the MSP version of Inspect Cloud right now, as we speak, is a single tenant system. So obviously that's going to be a big obstacle for them. But they say that it will become multi-tenant very, very soon. They wouldn't tell me exactly when, but lots of winks, and very soon, within the next few weeks, I think the multi-tenant version of this is going to come out. They did not actually, interestingly enough, they didn't have to adjust the pricing on this product at all to suit the MSP market, because it's been priced even for the corporate users on a pay-as-you-go basis from the get-go. An interesting side note: when you hear about pay-as-you-go, typically for any kind of cloud application, that means you get charged on a monthly kind of basis, consumption per month or whatever. ESET actually charges on a consumption basis per day. So if you've got, 10 users on Tuesday and 9 on Wednesday, you're going to pay a little bit less on Wednesday than you did on Tuesday. And if it goes up to 12 on Thursday, you'll pay a little bit more. You get billed once a month, but they actually make the adjustments day by day, which is interesting. Another thing that came out, again, part of the big MSP push at ESET, they now have a plugin for Kaseya's VSA RMM tool. They've got this joins earlier plugins for RMMs from ConnectWise and Datto, Enable, Ninja One, et cetera. They've got a lot more apparently coming, and PSA integrations coming as well. And the big picture, again, behind that is they are seriously investing in the MSP channel. And a great piece of evidence for that is one of the two people I interviewed when preparing the story is a guy named Chris Martinez, who 3 months ago joined ESET as their very first director of MSP channels. So they've created an MSP channel group. Chris Martinez came over from Malwarebytes to run that. He is in the very, very early stages right now of developing a MSP partner program that will probably show up towards the end of Q1, early Q2 in 2023. They're hiring inside salespeople and marketing people and a whole sort of, partner success onboarding team. So, just more evidence that companies that weren't maybe serious about MSPs in a dedicated way in the past are really getting serious about that channel right now.
Lots to dive in and lots to talk about. Looks all good. Peter, any thoughts?
I think the with all the news coming out from security organizations and adaptation and evolution, it goes back to what you were saying in the last conversation. We need rapid evolution of our security tools and vendors and partners and all that. So it's very encouraging to see, even sometimes if it's not the innovation that we're specifically looking for or that your clients are specifically looking for, and that I'm not saying that's the case here at all, but I think that it's one of those things that we just moving forward is so much more important than getting caught up in all of the opinions about what people want and need. And I felt like for a couple of years there was a little bit of a stall with the security companies because they were trying to process such a broad sea of opinions about the way that things should work and legacy ideas, legacy models, things like that. I also think that the investment ESET makes in the MSP focus of that is always a strong sign, a vote of confidence, in our industry. We've had a number of vendors that we've been excited to use because of the quality of their product, and we just haven't been able to because the specific model doesn't fit what we're doing. I think that's something that's always exciting to see.
So Rich, when it says this was an enterprise product, does that mean that the security is better, or it works better, or is it just the management of it doesn't fit the model of MSPs?
Yeah, I think very much the latter. I mean, they made a point of emphasizing from a functionality standpoint, and a security functionality standpoint, effectively the MSP version and the original version are identical. It's the same basic model, same basic protections, but there are different management requirements at an MSP. It's just a more diverse set of environments you're responsible for and customers and so there are going to be some different administrative capability. And then obviously the big difference, which is not in place now but is coming soon, is the multi-tenancy, which is something that the enterprise typically does not care about.
Gotcha. Very interesting. Well, yeah, hopefully we'll see some more innovation here, and we can always use more security-focused products to make those easier to deploy and easier to manage and easier to protect people, because there's bad people in the world. We talked about them at the top of the show, and we gotta protect ourselves from them. And speaking of protecting ourselves from the baddies out there, BlackPoint Cyber has expanded their tools to do some new things. What are they doing?
Yeah, they sort of like ESET, they announced a number of different things all at once and made a big splash. BlackPoint Cyber is an MDR solution. So managed detection and response. Obviously, they've got a very professionally expert staffed SOC, and then they also have a software interface that they really want to present as a sort of consolidated one-stop shopping kind of place to really take care of all the security needs for your customer. And so what that winds up meaning is they play nice with a lot of other vendors. There's a lot of integration with other security vendors so that you can kind of pull information in. If you're working with multiple security vendors, you can kind of pull that all into the BlackPoint Cyber tool. And so if you are into Bitdefender or Malwarebytes or SentinelOne for endpoint protection, a bunch of others as well, the BlackPoint Cyber platform plays well with those. There is now a new addition to the team. You now have the integration option of working with Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. So Microsoft Defender for Endpoint is part of this Microsoft Defender for Business package that Microsoft came out with in May, and basically that's included with business premium subscriptions to Microsoft 365. Business premium and above, basically you've got some version of Microsoft Defender now, which means that you and your customers are already kind of paying for this multifaceted security tool. And as a result of that, and partly, frankly, because Microsoft's reputation, Defender's reputation as a security product is pretty strong these days. There are a lot of people who are using Microsoft Defender for endpoint security. And so now if you're doing that or your customers are doing that for any whatever reason, because they like the protection or they like the fact that they get it with Microsoft 365, you can now pull all of that information into BlackPoint Cyber with the other stuff that you do. They have introduced, and I should say that functionality, all that kind of integration functionality, it just comes with the platform. There's no extra price that you're paying to use Defender for Endpoint along with the product. And same is true for a new vulnerability scanning feature that they've introduced. And right now, this is going to be the kind of vulnerability scanning tool that you see most often in the industry, which is to say that you can kind of run a scan on command. You can run or schedule scans to run at preset intervals and so on. But you're going to be doing it on an occasional basis, and quite often you'll be doing it for sales prospecting purposes to evaluate a potential customer's environment and call their attention to some things that their current MSP isn't doing for them and should be. But they are developing a continuous vulnerability management solution, and that distinction between on-demand scheduled vulnerability scanning and continuous vulnerability management is becoming increasingly important because cyber insurance companies and industry regulations increasingly are requiring end users to have either a continuous vulnerability management solution in place that is watching for new vulnerabilities 24/7 and calling attention to them when it finds one, or to do penetration testing on an annual basis or even more than that. And so BlackPoint Cyber will be getting into that market at some point relatively soon. And then last but not least, this is kind of interesting because we've spoken before about this trend in the industry now where you're seeing cybersecurity vendors partner up with cyber insurance companies where the security companies will feed telemetry, they'll feed information about the endpoints that they're protecting and the end clients they're protecting to the insurance company. And based on the assurances that data provides to the insurance company will, grant coverage because they know the protections that they require are in place, and potentially do that at a discounted rate because they can see how thoroughly secure this particular customer is versus that one over there. So that's the model that we're seeing more and more often. We're seeing Trend Micro do that with Cowbell Cyber. We've seen announcements from ConnectWise and Augment and others basically along this lines. What BlackPoint does, and they've been doing this for a little while, is they're actually selling the insurance policies themselves to their end customers. Now they're essentially a front end to the insurance carriers. They're working behind the scenes with the insurance companies. They're not in the insurance industry themselves. But instead of you having to go to the insurance companies, you can go to your cybersecurity vendor, get coverage from them. What they have added, though, to that model very recently is the option to get BlackPoint's coverage through a retail insurance broker. And so apparently, based on input and feedback from MSPs, what they learned is a lot of MSPs have a business relationship with a broker where they're essentially trading leads. The MSP is feeding leads to the broker's bringing their clients to the MSP. And so the MSPs are telling BlackPoint, we're really interested in this policy, but we want to do it with our broker, not directly from you. And so you can now do that. If your broker is signed up with BlackPoint, they can resell BlackPoint's insurance policies as well. And then they've made some adjustments that they've raised the limits on policies to $35 million. They've rolled in errors and omissions and directors and officers coverage. So you as an MSP can use these policies to cover your business. Your customers can do more than just cyber insurance when they buy these policies as well. So interesting twist on the evolution of cyber insurance and its relationship to the cybersecurity industry that we've been seeing in the past 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, wow. There's a stat in here that is always shocking to me because you're talking about cyber insurance. We've been talking on the show a lot lately because it's a big thing right now. And the prices are going up 79% increase in the second quarter of 2022. That's huge. That's untenable, right? Peter, how are you handling your customers with these massive increases in cyber insurance?
Yeah, it's a problem. I think that especially as we look at contracts, where we've committed to certain levels, and things like that. And I think that's something that we're keeping a close eye on, and we appreciate all the innovation in the market that's helping to, either level it out or bring it down or, create other options. I mean, it's kind of the Wild West right now.
Yeah, and as far as vulnerability scanning, do you use BlackPoint or do you use a different tool?
Yeah, we use several, but we love we use BlackPoint. We love what they're doing there, and I think that they've done a good job at leading some really strong innovation, in a couple of those spaces. And so yeah, and their team's great too.
Anything specific in these announcements that you're excited about or stands out to you?
I think honestly, just the continued. It's funny you mentioned that. Another organization that kind of announced a whole slew of updates at once. And I think that's, again, it's strong because there's a lot of updates to mention, but I also think that it shows that we're innovating in multiple facets at once, which I think is a really strong thing for sure.
Yeah, very good. Rich, anything else you want to add on this? I'm trying to get through the news quickly because we got a really awesome interview coming up and we're already pretty long.
Yeah, let's get our last news story in here, and then let's move on to our interview. Let's
do that. So Gradient is in the news. They've readied an alert management. I imagine anybody who is an MSP gets a lot of alerts, and anytime they hear alert and management, those two words together, probably gets very, very interested. So tell us about this one.
Yeah, well, that's a very interesting way to kind of get into the story because, this is news that isn't really all that newsy right now. This is a story based on a story I wrote when we were doing our last SMB forum, our last in-person event in Washington, D.C., which is coming up on a month ago now, but we just haven't had time to talk about it on the show. And I want to do that because it's really starting to help me at least understand where Gradient is going. So Gradient was founded by Colin Knox, who was the founder of Passportal, a product folks are probably familiar with. Passportal was acquired by SolarWinds. And Knox eventually moved on and created this company called Gradient. And it was a little unclear initially. What exactly is the mission over there? What are they kind of building towards? Their first product was one that would helped MSPs clean up the data in their PSA. The second solution that they introduced was a billing reconciliation tool. And this is a pain point that every MSP can relate to, basically. You've got all these different cloud-based tools, and they're all charging usage-based, and you've got to pull all this data together and reconcile it and consolidate it, and then come up with one invoice to send out to your customer. And so this first sort of full-blown Gradient product helped with that. And then a few months later, out came something called Synthesize. And Synthesize, we can now see, is really the foundation for where Gradient is going. What it basically does is provide a hub that connects all these cloud vendors on the one hand, and all the PSAs that are out there on the other hand. It integrates right now with 9 different PSA systems. Pretty much anything anyone watching or listening is using is going to be there. And they've got something like 90 different vendors either integrated into Synthesize or working on an integration. And what that's basically going to enable them to do is to streamline, synthesize a lot of business processes and support processes that are very painful for MSPs right now. So billing reconciliation was the first example of that. Alerts is example number 2. If you're working with lots of different vendors, they're all sending you alerts individually. And now, because there is an alerts module built on top of Synthesize, and I say now that this module may or may not, as we're speaking, be in production. If it isn't, it's coming very, very soon, based on what they told me a few weeks back. But because Synthesize is tying all, these 90 different vendors eventually together, you're going to be able to pull in all those alerts, consolidate them from up to 90 different vendors, and have access to them in one place, and then set up reactions and workflows out to your PSA that will apply to all those vendors at once, basically. And they haven't spoken to me about other use cases for the Synthesize platform, but now it's starting to become evident where they're trying to go at Gradient, because those are 2 really good pain points to start with. And I'm sure Peter could suggest 2 or 3 others. Man, wouldn't it be great if I didn't have to do X 3 times, 4 times, 5 times separately, if there was some tool that was just pulling that all together for me and feeding it into my PSA for me. That's the strategy at Gradient. And now they've got 2 modules, and it's going to be interesting to watch additional ones show up.
Sure. Yeah. I love watching what Colin's doing. He has such a strong understanding of, where the MSP pain points are, and I think the challenge, that we've seen, we need to dig into it with some of these releases, is that a lot of vendors, they think they're helping because they see the pain points, but they don't know exactly how to help. A PSA, and we have said, we got 21 companies, largely the same PSA, but 21 instances or 22. I mean, that there's so many differences between them, so does it, with the way agreements are set up, billing, products, SKUs, line items, procurement. I mean, all of those things are all nuances in that space. And so I know that that's been a lot of what they've worked to address is, not assuming that everybody has their PSA set up the same way or even set up correctly. So I think that'll continue to be where they've got to drive in this, to continue to be effective.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Rich, anything else in this story that you want to highlight? I know we're going to be talking about Gradient a lot because they're doing a lot with this platform, and we're going to be seeing some things. Peter, what are the other 2-3 things that are obvious pain points that you would like to see fixed?
If they can make sure that all my employees fill out their time cards correctly, that'd be great, and on time. And just I think that I'd love to see employee sentiment type things. I think burnout's a big thing in in the MSP space. And there's a lot of data orientation around that. We use things like capacity and utilization, but I think that the utilization and capacity conversations could use an evolution for sure. So that's one.
Yeah.
But
yeah, that's a good one.
I can definitely ask my team. I'm sure they have a list of them. But it's always a new thing, depending on how things evolve. And innovations always bring new challenges at the same time.
That it always does. There's always new challenges on the horizon, and the MSP IT industry as a whole is facing new challenges on the horizon. We've talked a couple times on the show about how government intervention is starting to take root in the space following the big Kaseya breach, that kind of security incident that happened, and really brought MSPs into the limelight and started getting governments looking at regulations and licensing and all kinds of considering all these things that kind of regulate the industry. And a year ago, we had Karl Palachuk on, who's kind of taking some initiative to make sure that MSPs have a voice in that, and formed the National Society of IT Service Providers, and with kind of a vision at the time of just getting a seat at the table and organizing and having those MSPs get some kind of voice and say as these things go. But we're going to let him talk about that. But the fascinating conversation that we're going to have, him and Amy are back, and where they're going to talk about kind of what got accomplished in year 1, what's coming up in year 2. Really great interview. You're not going to miss it. Stick around. We will be right back. And welcome back to part 2 of ChannelPro Weekly. Last year, author and consultant Karl Palachuk formed the National Society of IT Service Providers to give ChannelPros a loud voice as government bodies draft and enact laws directly impacting the IT channel, like cybersecurity laws and professional codes of conduct. And we spoke about it on the show at the time last year, and joining us now to give an update on their first year and plans for year 2 is Karl Palachuk and Amy Babinchak. So Karl, let's start with you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
I should actually say welcome back. You've been on the show many times over the years. It's always a delight to see you and have you on. But in case anybody missed one of those many awesome Karl Palachuk appearances, please tell us a little bit more about you and your background.
So I built and sold a few IT services in Sacramento, California, and I've written most of the books on managed services and all of the best-selling books on managed services.
How many books have you written? I have written all of the books.
I've written over 20, not all of which are on managed services. So one of my favorite books is Relax, Focus, Succeed, which has got little or nothing to do with IT. So
And a very good topic that many of us need to take to heart as well. Are you working on book number 21?
Sadly, I'm working on 3 different books. So the last year I put all of my efforts into the National Society of IT Service Providers. So sadly, that has delayed another book. And then as time goes on, I go, I should also write a book about that. So I've got a few in the works, one of which at least will come out next year.
Wow. So you give a lot of professional help, but it sounds like you need a professional help for writing because you just...
I do need professional help. Yes.
You do a lot. Awesome. And also joining you is Amy Babinchak. Amy, great to see you as well. Tell us a little bit more about you and your background.
Well, I still own an MSP up in Michigan, 22 years now. And I also own a company called Third Tier that helps out other MSPs, and that's where I also do my writing out of, and courses and stuff like that to help people out. And then together with Rand Buccianico, who I know you guys are good friends with as well, we do some M&A consulting.
Awesome. Ryan is a good friend. She was on the show recently, so it's always good to have her, and always great to see you as well. So where in Michigan are you roughly? I'm
in the suburbs of Detroit, so down by the bottom.
Down by the okay. So and how is that? How is the Detroit area these days? You always hear jokes and stuff, but I actually haven't been there in years.
It's booming and amazing. Like there isn't anything that's old anymore. Like everything is totally new build, new. It's kind of crazy, the boom that's happened.
Awesome.
In Detroit proper. I mean, the suburbs never had the issues that Detroit City did.
Sure. Yeah. It always seems to be the inner cities that where all the stories come from, I would imagine.
Yeah, it turned out really well for them. They went all the way to bankruptcy, but the end result has been phenomenal. So
very cool. And so now you're spending a lot of time working on this with Mr. Karl, which we're going to dive into. So Rich, why don't I kind of send it over to you, and you can kind of give our listeners and viewers kind of a quick recap of what we talked about last year and kind of what we want to talk about today.
Yeah, well, I mean, for folks in the audience who are brand new to the National Society, let's just start with what is it? I mean, it was created, Karl, you created it in July of last year, so it's a little bit more than a year old right now. Talk a little bit about the mission that you had in mind for it when you initially created it, and maybe how that has evolved a little bit over the course of this first year.
Thank you. So, it really started with a series of blog posts about all the things that are wrong with our industry, and not necessarily wrong, but challenges, the challenges of insurance and ransomware and legislation and bad actors within the industry and not being understood by the media. And, it's one thing after another. And so I just wanted to have a public discussion and stop ignoring the challenges and the warts and say, let's do something about this. Let's transform this. And then it sort of evolved into the concept of turning an industry into a profession. And the board was put together last year. Amy very quickly became one of the primary leaders, probably the primary leader, and the president of the board. And since then, we have put together mission, vision, and value statements that are on our website. We have our website that is a true resource at nsitsp.org. And we just recently finished our elections and elected every single member of every board and all the committees. So we are now 100% a member-run association. And we're approaching, depends on when this airs, approaching 800 members. So it's a great movement, and we have another tough year ahead of us, but I think we're going to make a lot of progress.
And I just want to kind of call attention, because I've been sort of watching this from the sidelines. And so, July 2021, you have this idea, let's get MSPs and other IT providers organized so that we can address the regulations that are starting to show up in state governments, so that we can kind of deal with people who call themselves MSPs but aren't, ethical practitioners. And so it's an idea. And then that kicked off some meetings on Zoom, some of which I attended. And then there was enough enthusiasm for that idea. It's like, okay, we're going to build an organization. And a year later, it's like, it's like a 501c6. I mean, this is for real now. You've got, you've figured out a dues structure. You've put together the board. You've put together the committees. I just speak a little bit, Amy, because you've been so closely involved with this, just all of the sort of infrastructure building that you've had to do in the last year so that you can begin to pursue the real mission of the organization in a serious way going forward.
Yeah, I speaking for myself and maybe for Karl, I don't think we actually knew what this job was going to be and how big it was going to be. It's building the infrastructure out to become a national organization of the stature and size and status of the IT industry is no small effort, right? And we are so lucky that we have people in IT right now that have those backgrounds, that were able to, that were able to show us and lead the way and help us build that out so that we have the infrastructure in place to not be an 800-person membership as we are now, but that we can be an 80,000-person membership as we hope to be, many years down the road. Because we're a very large industry, and just to set that infrastructure in place has been a huge task, and it literally consumed the whole year. And so this year, what I hope is, and I'm confident will happen, that we are now, I think, out of the organizational building stage and onto let's begin to provide services to members. Let's get that legislative agenda underway. Let's begin to talk about how we make our industry a more professional, or occupied by more professional people, right? And do the things that we need to do as a true membership organization. And so I think the elections are the culmination of that process now.
It's funny, you talk about July. So there was a lot of activity before that, the meetings and so forth. And then it became clear that we have to do something. And I will never forget July 4th weekend, because I ran off to Nashville for the weekend. And I sent a note to Kara, who does our web development, and I said, I need a really simple website. It's just like the most basic thing you could possibly imagine. And by the end of July, it had become a massive tool with forums and blogs and news and all these sections, and became an amazing resource. Also, July 4th weekend was the Kaseya I don't want to say disaster, but the issues with Kaseya servers. And so that weekend and that series of events really demonstrated the need for an association, because a lot of the reporting by the news media was completely wrong, because they don't know what these tools do. They don't know why anybody would use these dangerous tools. Legislators, started going, hey, you guys have to stop, screwing around and start protecting your clients. And right, there was just a lot of activity that demonstrated when people are talking about us, we need a seat at the table. And so I think that motivated a whole lot of people to jump on board. I think in the first month that we opened membership, we had 75 people who just, dropped $100 because they couldn't see any reason not to, and the amount of work that's been done in the last year is phenomenal. All of these, dozens of people on our boards and committees have put in just hundreds and hundreds of hours each. And so we have many thousands of hours into this, and it's finally paying off.
hours and hours of unpaid labor. Actually, it's, this is all volunteer work. So yeah, it's been an amazing climb for you guys, and just kind of watching it has been impressive. Let's talk a little bit about the mission. Because I mentioned the issue of regulations and state governments and legislation starting to kind of show up, and I definitely want to come back to that and talk about that. But at the last meeting of the society, Amy, you said something that was really interesting, which was just that the assumption was dealing with state legislatures was going to be a big thing that you folks needed to worry about, and in the year since then, it's become clear that cyber insurance, the cyber insurance companies, in a way, are just as big, if not a bigger hurdle. They are sort of regulating the industry in their own way for their own purposes too. So, I mean, talk a little bit about that specific challenge and how the society can potentially do something about it.
Well, I don't think the society has decided yet what it is that we're going to do, but I think we've recognized the problem for sure. You're right. When a little more than a year ago, when the organization formed, we were seeing a little bit of activity and legislative wise at the federal level, gobs of activity at the state level. It has sort of slowed down a little bit. But we saw definitely the rise of the insurance industry, and many people having trouble getting cyber insurance, and knew the insurance industry effectively putting down regulation on the IT industry, again, without our input, right? Their motivation is to reduce their losses. And as an example, recently I had an insurance provider tell me that the way that I needed to manage my clients in order to receive their insurance was I needed to create a menu of security offerings and then have my customers all select what they wished to purchase once a year. And that everything else that they did not select or that I didn't mention would become effectively exclusions from insurance. And I said, to them, that's not how I do business, right? Don't run a restaurant. I don't have a menu, right? And so they refused to insure me because I refused to create a menu. And, we came at an impasse, and I said, thank you very much for these number of years of service, but I'm moving on to some greener pasture that understands the industry better. And this is actually from one of the specialists in our industry, supposedly, but their interests are not the same as our interests, right? Our interests are in protecting our clients. Their interests are in protecting themselves against loss. And these interests, while they should be compatible, if we worked together, they should be compatible interests. But when we're not involved, we get these really ridiculous one-sided things that then just happen to our industry because we weren't at the table to help do something more rational.
Well, you mentioned a few, that, and then, after the Kaseya event, some of the press, being way off base. What are some of the things that stood out, either in the way insurance companies are acting or the way the press, has treated us that hasn't demonstrated that alignment and, that doesn't reflect correctly on us?
I heard right after the Kaseya thing, in the week or so afterward, I heard a national radio program where somebody made the comment that obviously this is not very well written software, and obviously these people who installed it don't know what they're doing, and obviously these people are not interested in security. And I'm like, well, none of those things are true, right? This is like, obviously you have no idea what you're talking about, Yeah. So, but they don't know what they don't know, and part of what we need to do is literally develop materials. I mean, one of my goals is to have a place on the site where someday we can have a press room where people can go and get an answer to the question, what is an MSP? What is an RMM? Why would somebody use one of these dangerous tools? Because we need to be able to have something ready so that the next time there's a story, because there will be a story, in a perfect world, I would love to see the media go grab some materials, take them word for word, put them into their story, and then ask a local IT service provider, Peter, what do you think about this? And then that becomes the 7 seconds at the end. But at least we have had some influence in actually educating them so that they know what they're talking about. Because it maybe that's just a pet peeve of mine, but it's a perfect example of our industry has grown beyond the ability of a normal person to understand what we do, whether that's a insurance salesman or a reporter.
Yeah. That's not a pet peeve. I mean, just a pet peeve at all. I think that from our standpoint, recognizing that MSPs, we are naturally going to use systems and tools and be, deeply integrated in our clients' companies, in a way that is always going to pose a risk. And it's our job to make sure that it's significantly that we're mitigating significantly more risk, than we're potentially, introducing. But yeah, I agree. It's no one's ever really understood our industry, unless you're in it. Now, all of a sudden, people, certain people need to care, and it's hard to bring them up to speed on 25 years of, how this is all developed, what we actually do.
Well, we also have to admit, though, that our industry hasn't been perfect on this. We do have people that put on their website, you sit back and I'll take care of everything. But as we know, there's IT is very, very complex. There is no business that can take care of everything. That's not going to happen. And, the whole sit back and don't worry message, it sounds good in your marketing until you have to try to defend it in court.
Yeah.
And then, I sat back and let you do everything. Did you do everything? Oh, look, you didn't do everything. So that's a bad position to be in. We want to make sure that people don't get in that position. But so our industry didn't do the right thing in that particular instance. But on the, I tell you, one of the most disappointing things that I encountered after the big security incident was that we were all thrown under the bus together, right? That was Orion. There's no SMB company that uses Orion. And that message didn't get out. It almost immediately came down on the small business industry where none of us use that software. But the assumption was made, all of the incompetent people are down at the lower end of the market. So we know that that's where all the bad stuff happened. It's totally not where any of the bad stuff happened.
Right.
And the thing that was published that really just irked me to no end was when CISA, right, our federal government information source for IT security for the SMB industry, put out a document on how businesses should go about protecting themselves from MSPs. That is not the message that we want. We don't want anybody to say that ever. And it was really aggressive, and it was really a bad black eye for our business. And we wrote a few letters, didn't get any direct response, but we have seen CISA change their messaging. So then that's how it works at the government level most of the time. You write in, you talk to people, you do things. You maybe get some head nods or you get no response or whatever, but you just sort of watch what happens. And if the needle moved, then you know that your input actually made a difference.
Yeah, we've had other regulators. Was it Texas where this lobbyist, this bureaucrat just decided, hey, I'm going to regulate you because I can?
In the banking industry in Texas, the Texas Department of Banking, this is fairly recent, so that's just a couple months back. Texas Department of Banking sent out a letter to as many MSPs as they could identify that were working in the financial industry. So if you had a credit union client, or you were providing some services to the banking industry at all, they got a letter that said, we need you to outline exactly what it is you're doing and who all of your customers are. And you must comply under such and such. And they included the statute, and it's a pre-existing one from many years ago that said that, they had the right to regulate that, but they just decided to turn it on because of the issues that are happening security-wise. So it's all states. It's not just some states that are looking at this. All 50 states are heavily invested in looking at cybersecurity. And, every legislative person with any ambition whatsoever wants to be the one to solve the cybersecurity problem. Right?
Yep.
They want their name on that. So.
And it's funny. I'm curious to your opinion. And Rich, I'm sorry if I'm getting ahead or, stealing the interview, but I'm really curious to know your opinions on if it should be mandated at a federal level. I think largely, a lot of us had opinions that we don't like, being regulated at the federal level, but being regulated 50 different ways in the 50 jurisdictions that we work in is really, really tough. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, my thought is, I don't think that at the federal level that there's anything that can be done to reach down to the individual MSP, that will only happen at the state level. The federal can do broad conceptual cybersecurity should be defined as this, but it will come down to the individual states to decide whether or not they want to regulate or license individual firms. So that's part of what makes it a gigantic issue to be tackled, because we have to tackle it in all 50 states, and every state has its own way of going about doing those things.
Yep.
Yeah, it is literally, I use the analogy of how does an ant eat an elephant one bite at a time. Man, we got a herd of elephants because we have all the states and all the little agencies, and it's quite amazing and in some ways overwhelming. In addition to which, we really need to begin the work of creating an alliance with insurance companies so that they understand what we do for a living, and that, they understand what the actual challenges are. We have bad actors. Yes, it's true. But we all also know insurance industries spent 10 years selling cybersecurity insurance where it was 100% profit because nobody knew what they were defending against and nobody had any real losses. And then ransomware, went from $100 to $1,000 to $10 to $1 million to many millions. And so now the perpetrators are making billions of dollars a year, and the insurance company is losing billions of dollars because they sold stuff that they didn't understand. So, I get that there's this pullback and now they have to defend their flanks. That's all cool. But going forward, there has to be something rational based on actual numbers and based on actual probabilities. And, to be honest, we also have to educate all the small businesses out there who say, oh, that doesn't apply to me, and they're only after Bank of America, and, nobody wants some little dentist in Peoria. It's like, they don't actually know you exist. You have what they call a random IP address.
Right. No, it's true. It's a double-edged sword. It's been, some of the regulations and the actions of the insurance companies have been beneficial for MSPs who struggle to get, to influence their clients to do the things that they need to do security wise. All of a sudden, when they're uninsurable, it works. But we've seen a lot of difference between what insurance companies say should be done and what's actually going to protect people, at the same time. So.
And not to just bash bureaucrats in the government or whatever, I would also point out CMMC and, some of the stuff that's being done with HIPAA and other things. We are starting to see some agreement that, look, you can defend yourself from liability if you follow these things, develop a checklist based on this. There are protocols. There's a definable list. And, after 20 years of HIPAA being, I don't know, I just, you can't ever be compliant, so give up now. We now have a list that actually says, if you follow these requirements, we will consider you to be safe from certain kinds of actions. Well, that's a huge step in the right direction. And I think modeling things like that going forward is very helpful. Insurance industries have always had audits, and they have IT people do the audits, right? Yep. But then they ignore them and say, oh, yeah, no firewall, no this, no that, no two-factor authentication. And they basically didn't care. Well, now they care. And now they're making you like, oh, sorry, I have to turn down this insurance if you don't do these things, which forces the clients to actually open their wallets and get something done. So it's not an easy question by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah. Thank you.
An interesting thing happened with CMMC this year too, right? On the one sense, they simplified it down from 5 levels to, what is it now, 2 or 3 levels, and allowed more self-attestation so that the smaller end of the market can comply easier, and that was all good for business, right? And in my area, we have a lot of those kinds of businesses that are subject to CMMC. And
However, the flip side of that is the other part of what was done is it says, unless you MSP are a official CMMC, well, I lost the word. Anyway, a certified provider of that service by their system, you can't do business with those people. So any client that you have that is subject to CMMC, if you are not a registered CMMC provider, they are no longer your client because you're not allowed to provide services to them, or they will lose their CMMC status, which loses them their federal contracts. And guess what they're going to choose? Their federal contract or you. And so while IT was at the table for those discussions, the smaller end of the IT market was not at the table. And so we just got blackballed out of the whole CMMC marketplace, which so really sucked.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because that goes straight. I mean, when the society was set up last year, part of the thinking, like one of the things that I know that happened very early on, was there was this sort of draft template created for a state regulation that, here are the things that the actual IT providers think a regulation like that should include. The phrase "a seat at the table" has come up a great deal during this conversation. And I know that this is, now I'm talking year 2 stuff, but what is the potential vision in terms of the role that the society can play once it has a seat at the table? What is the vision for the role that you guys can play to, give the channel a voice and to be a part of all these decisions that right now are getting made by state legislators and insurers and compliance, standard drafters who don't necessarily understand what the world looks like from a ChannelPro point of view?
Well, I think a piece of it is that we can talk about the things that we have in common, the things that we believe we should do in terms of professionalism. We have talked about, within our own organization, putting together lists of just, hey, here are our members who have business licenses and insurance and are in good standing. Right? That's a badge we can provide. It basically costs nothing. And yet it allows us to begin growing a list of people who meet the most minimal requirements, right? Because you have to remember, part of this is you have to address the absolute bottom of the industry, and you have to address the top at the same time, right? So we want to begin to make those moves. That will stave off states coming in and saying, we're going to create a registry of you people. The state of Louisiana sort of kicked off the actual legislation piece by requiring, they defined MSP and MSSP, and then requiring that anybody who served a state agency has to register with the state and meet certain requirements. So that whole concept of building a database has begun. Luckily, it only applies to those doing business with the state, but it was generated by, Kyle Erdogan, the Secretary of State, basically saying, MSPs are providing contracts taking money, but not protecting. And my guess is what happened is there's a whole bunch of contracts that didn't include things like backup, disaster recovery, right? Constant monitoring, 24/7 checks, right? So, I don't know that anybody did anything wrong, but that was the perception. So, states do what they can. They've got only so many tools in their tool belt. And so I think we need to begin to sort of formulate what we think that should look like, because it's going to happen whether it happens to us or with us. So we need to, the whole term of having a seat at the table, we need to actually be in on that discussion when they're talking about how to regulate us.
So we have a legislative committee, and the legislative committee has an agenda which is incredibly ambitious, and they're going to need a lot more members of that committee to pull it off and to make it happen. But part of their agenda is to a mission is maybe better than agenda, but part of their mission is to educate IT professionals in how to self-represent in their own state, right? So we don't all have the skills to know how to properly contact your local legislator, how to get a meeting with them, how to find what is being talked about cybersecurity wise in your area, how to get your voice heard. What does that first meeting look like? How does the government work? So part of that committee's agenda is to create that educational material, because we're fortunate to have some folks on the committee that have that background and have done that before. So they are building up those materials to educate. So that's going to be a major focus. Like I said, we have to tackle all 50 states, and that means you need, people in every state that are educated that can go forth and do that. The other thing that committee will do at some point down the line is begin to put together those position papers that Karl mentioned earlier, maybe the FAQ and maybe certain position papers on, hey, this is what our industry thinks about cybersecurity insurance, and what our position is on that, or what our position is on licensure of MSPs, which some states seem to be headed down that path. And so they're going to be creating that stuff as well. So if you're looking for a place to get involved and you have opinions on those things, that would be a great place to get involved and help us build out those materials.
And another angle that we're looking at down the road is to look at education and the role of education. There's a ton of schools that are teaching different kinds of technology and so forth, and to be able to say, hey, there are certain classes that will help you be good at the actual things you need to do to secure your clients and, be good business people. Because first of all, the MSPs have to be stable and profitable and have a good business model. And, it's like Maslow's hierarchy, right? First, they have to have a roof over their heads, and then they can, go to the next level. So, we want to look at what kinds of education we want people to have and help people understand the role of certification and education going forward. Again, that's the kind of thing states love. Hey, you want to be a contractor, you want to cut hair, you want to be a dental assistant. You go to school, you get a certificate, you pass a test, and the state gives you a piece of paper. That's how they know to solve problems. So we can't ignore the fact that that's the mindset that we are dealing with times 50 states.
And states are asking those questions. So one of our members is pretty close on the committee, cyber committee. I forget exactly what its name is, in California. And he said, the first meeting that he had with the chair of that committee, just to introduce himself, said, I don't understand who you guys are. Who are MSPs? What makes you qualified? What degree do you got? What degree do you have? He's like, well, we don't, there is no specific degree that, all MSPs have this degree, like all lawyers have are Juris Doctors. Oh, well, okay, then you're a trade. So who's your trade association? Well, guess what? We just started one. And actually, if you look back in history, this is what has happened to every industry come before us. Lawyers, accountants, doctors, they all had to create their own membership organizations to represent and say, this is who we are as an industry. This is what we stand for. This is what makes us qualified. And these are the opinions that we have. And that's, they had to create those organizations, and we had to create our own organization as well.
So let's talk a little bit about membership. So I mean, you've already got 800. I mean, that's pretty good for a year. But you need as many, boots on the ground. The more people join, the more clout the organization has. So let's talk a little bit, first of all, just like today, as things stand today, what are the gives and gets? It sounded like it's $100 to get in, Karl. What do you get for your $100, basically, for anyone out there who is contemplating joining the society? And then is there an idea over time, as we talk about things like certification and codes of ethics and so on, is there an idea over time that to get into this society, you will have to clear the bar, if you will, that there will be standards for membership qualifications to get in?
Yes, absolutely. So we're starting out slow because basically the board met, and Amy can remind me, but I think it was either the first or second meeting, decided we want to make it $100 because there's nobody in this industry who's serious that can't afford $100. Like if you can't afford $100, you need to go do something else, right? So, but the idea is that basically there's no barrier to that, right? It's less than your cable bill. So over time, we want to begin raising the bar. We are coming, I hope, to the close of a code of ethics task force that will produce a code of ethics, the sort of official code of ethics. And then the next step is that when we revise the membership program to have levels based on size, we will require members to agree to our code of ethics. And, we'll have a period of, putting it out and having feedback and all that, which is what we did with the mission, vision, and values statements. But, it'll be a reasonable and rational code of ethics. And like many, many industries, part of being in the industry is you have to agree to bill fairly and, be honest and transparent and so forth and so on. So that's the first bar, which is pretty low. And then over time, we expect to raise that bar and to have different levels of professionalism, potentially, again, as sort of like little badges that show up on the site, so that theoretically, like right now, anybody could go to our site and look up who our members are. Eventually, that could easily be a tool that says, oh, here's somebody who's got a certification in security, and here's somebody who, has been in business for more than 15 years or whatever. They can begin to do some research. And, many, many times over the years, people have come up with, oh, I'm going to have a list of MSPs, and then people will go and look at all the MSPs and pick one. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about something where people can look and see what your professional accomplishments are so that you can move to the next level. And that way, basically, it's sort of like a check that you would expect. If you're going to have work done on your house, you check the contractor number, you go to the state, and you put in that number, and you see, how qualified they are. I would expect potential clients to look you up and say, okay, are they a member of this professional association, and what accomplishments do they have? So, and then build from there.
Yeah, we do have a problem in our industry from the consumer point of view, right? If we flip our head around and say, okay, now we're somebody who needs to hire an MSP. How do you do that? And I always feel bad when I go to meetings with potential new clients because they have no idea. They don't know who they're talking to. They don't know what questions to ask. They don't, and the not knowing who you're talking to is a big deal, right? If as a business owner, if I go out and I'm like, gosh, I need someone to help me with my books, I know right away, am I talking to a bookkeeper? Am I talking to an EA? Am I talking to a CPA? There is nothing like that in our industry for the consumer of our services to have any idea who they're talking to when they go to hire. And I know if I hire a bookkeeper, I'm going to pay one rate. If I hire an EA, I'm going to pay a higher rate. If I hire a CPA, I'm going to pay an even higher rate. And same thing if I go to the oil change place down the street, I don't walk in there thinking, hey, can you replace my transmission and sell me a new car? I know that those are the guys that change oil, right? I know that because that's the way the mechanical industry is organized, and all these industries have these organizations that allow the consumer to make a more educated decision. And that's another piece that we're missing that I hope that we will be able to affect that change via our organization at some point down the line. But I think that's an important piece of that we need to also be working on.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize what Amy just said. I, over the weekend, have a friend who needs some help with his email, and of course, I'm not going to do it for him. So I told him go to Upwork, and I helped him post an ad, and then I helped him look through the 34 responses he got, and there were people who were web developers and programmers and database professionals and all kinds of people who had never touched an email system. They probably could do a fine job. They could probably figure it out, but he had no way of knowing how you decide who could actually migrate one domain with one email, right? He didn't have the skills to be able to pick one person to help him with that, right? And it seems easy to us, but it's a far more complicated world when it is not what you do for a living.
If you had to pick a heart surgeon without having any way of knowing whether these people are qualified to operate on you or not, it would be a terrifying position to be in, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about is I don't know, this person could be good at what they do or not. It would be great to have a standard in place that gives people some assurance they're dealing with a real professional. Let's kind of wrap this up a little bit here with a call to action. So for the folks who are beginning to understand why the society needs to exist and where you're kind of going from now, what would you like the folks in the audience here to do next, basically?
Join. Go to nsitsp.org and join now, because when we have the new membership, it'll be at a different price. So just so you know, now's a great time to join. And also get involved. We just finished our election, and we have lots of things to do. We have people who are going to be present at many conferences, ChannelPro, obviously, and some others. Come see us at the table, talk to us, ask what you can do and how you can get involved. And our committee chairs are always making lists of people that they're going to call on when they need something. Amy?
I would also encourage everyone to join. Right? We need bodies, right? If this organization is ultimately going to be successful, every single one of us needs to be a member of the organization. And, there's, as we've outlined here in this discussion, there is a huge amount of work to do. We're just lifting off the ground. And so, we need numbers in the organization, but we also need volunteers. That legislative committee needs a huge number of volunteers to pull off its agenda. We've got a marketing committee that we really need help with. You don't have to be a marketing professional, but we need people to be able to get out there on social media and at the conferences and talk it up and raise awareness that this organization exists. And to help us out with that. And, there's several other committees going, so there's lots of room for everyone to be part of the solution, right? It's not just sit back and wait and see what's going to happen. The time to jump in is now.
Peter, any parting thoughts?
I appreciate it. I think that this is work that our industry definitely needs. And what's the URL again? Just for reminder?
It's NSITSP, National Society of IT Service Providers.
.org.
.org.
Awesome. And we'll make sure that we post that that URL in the show notes page. So open up the description area on your phone and you'll find that link in there. Karl, Amy, if anybody wanted to reach out and ask questions, what would be the best way to do that?
Well, Amy B at nsitsp.org or Karl P at nsitsp.org. But, I'd say start at the website. It's an amazing resource. And we actually have forms there, and it's super easy to give us your money.
Always a good thing. And I'm sure as you work with lots and lots of government politicians in 50 states, they'll find ways to make it easy to give them money as well. That's how government works, right? Good stuff. So this is what you're doing is incredibly important, not only to just incredibly important to the entire MSP industry and those who do this. It was a matter of time before government came kind of crashing down on all of you. And I think it's going to make everybody's lives better being able to have a voice, because not having a voice in this case is not going to work out probably well for anybody, as you could well imagine. Great stuff. Awesome stuff. I hope everybody goes and checks it out. And we are going to take a short break. When we come back, Peter Melby will hopefully still be with us on the other side if he's got time, and we'll break down the show and have a little fun and more. So stick around. We will be right back. And we are back now with part 3 of this episode of ChannelPro Weekly. We're going to wrap up the show here in a few minutes. But first, we don't normally have interviews that kind of go on quite that long. And I tell you, I made a comment to them after the interview was done before we came back on here. I love it when we can get 3 just amazing experts and just have them go to town on a topic like this and listen to what they're doing, like where I can just kind of sit back and just let the brilliance fly in all different directions. It was a really, really insightful conversation and really interesting to see kind of what's happening just with the IT industry as a whole and kind of some of the challenges that are being faced as we get into the realm of regulations and all that kind of thing. So Peter, anything that came out of that conversation with Amy and Karl that you'd like to highlight, or was a particular interest?
Yeah, I think that, the number one thing that keeps coming up is that the more that we show that we can, establish standards ourselves, and that we're not afraid of being held accountable, and help define that accountability in a way that actually is legitimate in the market, the easier it's going to be for us and the better it's going to be for our customers. We don't need people who are not understanding IT to regulate this space, but we do need to make sure that there's accountability and clear, ways that we can demonstrate that accountability. So, they got my $100, and I think that what they're doing is something that everybody should be, jumping onto.
You signed up the minute the interview was over.
I just proved, they said it was easy to do. It was. They took my money without any roadblocks whatsoever. So
that's awesome. And I always like to say, if anybody has got $100 burning in their pocket, actually every MSP who cares about the future of their business in this way should absolutely get on board. But if you've got another $100 in your pocket that's burning a hole in your pocket, you can send that right to me. I'll put a page up. You can go and you can just put it there. That would be great. And I'll make sure I give Rich 2% just because I'm really nice. You want 2%, Rich?
This idea is sounding better and better.
But then I will charge you a 1% service fee for doing all the work for you. So good. So Rich, anything that came out of that conversation that you'd like to highlight?
And I'll just echo what Peter was saying. I said at some point late in the interview, how scary would it be if you had to get a heart surgeon and then you had no way of knowing if they're qualified to operate on you or not. The only thing that might be scarier is if state legislators were deciding who is or isn't a heart surgeon, right? I mean, it really ought to be other doctors. And so that just calls attention to the importance of what these folks are doing, get that seat at the table so that it's the people who understand IT who are setting the standards for it, and not our elected officials who, hopefully are good at other things.
Yeah. Well, and also one thing too, if your heart surgery is scheduled at a location that is on a shipping dock and a big shipping container, probably not the heart surgeon for you. Might want to find one at a hospital. That's usually a good sign. Rich, we are a little long in the show. Normally, we like to do a little fun with our guest. Unfortunately, we just went long, and Peter's got to get going. And but that's okay. Next time he'll be back, folks, and we'll have a little fun with him next time. But I do want to give Rich an opportunity to kind of break down the show. So tell us what might have been and what will be.
Yeah, well, if you want to know what has been, a great way to find out is to go to the ChannelProNetwork.com website on Fridays. We're doing it every other week, actually, these days. But every other week, you're going to find our In Case You Missed It post written by our own James Gaskin. We've got one coming up tomorrow as we record this, and James is going to catch you up on all the news recently out of Salesforce and Slack, which Salesforce now owns, ServiceNow, NetSuite, these big kind of enterprise brand names have been doing some things that are relevant to the SMB channel. There's a new partner program from Nutanix, speaking about a big brand name. Some interesting new SMB tech buying research from CompTIA, and an adult Happy Meal from McDonald's that James will be telling you about. I'll let him share the details. And then coming up, next week, back out on the road, I'm going to Enable's Empower event in Las Vegas, which with a lot of other folks. And so I'm sure we're going to have a ton of Enable-related news to talk about in next week's show. TD SYNNEX is doing its Inspire conference next week as well. The 20 is doing their annual Vision event for member MSPs. And the ASCII Group is doing their last event of the year in Dallas, actually right up the street from the 20 and last event of the year. So they will be handing out the coveted ASCII Cup to one of their vendor sponsors. And it will be very interesting to see who the ASCII Cup winner is this year.
Ooh, do they let people take the cup home and drink beer out of it and everything, like the Stanley Cup?
Pretty sure.
Nice. That'd be awesome. Well, good stuff. I want to give a big thank you to Karl Palachuk and Amy Babinchak for joining us for that interview. It was very good. And also a big thank you to Peter Melby, CEO of Greystone Technology, for joining us. Peter, it's always awesome having you on. Really amazing stuff. And I cannot wait for you to come back. Did you have a good time?
Had a blast, and even though you didn't get ask me any awkward questions at the end, we'll have to do that next time. So we
will. Yeah, we got a couple different games we play. We always like to keep our guests on our toes, and I'm sorry we didn't get to that. I promise we will make time to do that next time because it's always a lot of fun, and I hope to have you back. For anybody who wants to learn more about you, connect with you, where can they go? How can they find you?
LinkedIn, Peter Melby. For New Charter information, go to newchartertech.com. Greystone, the MSP I founded is greystonetech.com. Love staying in touch with people.
Awesome. And I hope people go and reach out to you. And of course, we need everyone to subscribe to the ChannelPro Weekly Podcast everywhere podcasts are found. We are also on YouTube. So if you like to watch on YouTube, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell, leave a comment. Comments are always helpful. We like to get those as well. If you want to send us an email, it's podcast@channelpronetwork.com. And of course, that is the website you want to go to, channelpronetwork.com. Go there each and every day. Sit as your homepage. There you'll find the latest news, articles, white papers, downloads, resources, all kinds of really, really good stuff that will keep you on top of what's going on in this crazy changing industry, or give you some sound business advice and practices that will help you with your business in some way, and ideally make more money, because that is what we all want to do. With that, we are going to say goodbye, but we will see everybody in episode 242 next week. See you then.